fresh insight that we would get. And so it's a very interesting dynamic process. And towards the end of the song, we let the devotional element predominate over this, so that Bolava Vithala, Pahava Vithala, Bolava Vithala, Pahava Vithala, 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 Bolava Vithala, Pahava Vithala, Bolava Vithala, Pahava Vithala, Bolava Vithala, Pahava Vithala, 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 Pahava Vithala, oh Bolava Pahava, Bolava Vithala, Bolava Vithala, Pahava Vithala, 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 Vithala. The chant element of because that is also a very beautiful aspect of Abhang, where the Namavali aspect of music. So I think an Abhang involves many aspects of these devotional, classical elements, and for us it is a celebration of music at its devotional, at its classical, and at its creative best, at its most spontaneous. In fact, when we started singing Abhangs with pakhavaj and the harmonium and the tabla, that added a very fresh insight into Abhang and an experience. We experienced it in a very different way.
Correct. Actually, in a Carnatic music concert with the typical orchestra that is accompanying of a typical Carnatic music concert, which comprises of a violin and a mridangam, the lay also, the rhythm and the structure of the Abhang flows in a very different way.
Correct.
Than that in a typical Abhang Vani Sangeet, I think.
Correct. The tabla follows the sum or the landing point of, it does not follow Bolava, that's not how the edip, which is very important in Carnatic.
So in Carnatic music, typically, let's demonstrate that. How would we sing that in a Carnatic music, or how we used to do that? Bolava Vithala, Pahava Vithala, Bolava Vithala.
It's Aredam, as we would call it in Carnatic. But in Hindustani, it would be Bolava Vithala, Pahava Vithala. So on the tha, that is the sum, and that the tabla would follow that. And
so the whole structure of the Abhang and the way it flows is totally different.
Or, Kashi Zavumi Vrindavana, Kashi it's not Kashi, but Vrindavana. So that becomes the sum, and the tabla would follow that. So, and the rhythm is also maintained by the tabla, not by you. So these were learning things that we truly learnt a lot when we sang Abhangs with
traditional
Abhang Vani artists.
Yes.
And also we learned to experience an Abhang in a very spontaneous way, more so when we sang it. Because in a kacheri, when Abhang comes at the fag end of the concert, it satisfies a different need for a concert. It highlights the devotional element. But when you do a standalone Abhang concert, you are trying to weave in classical elements, creative elements more freely than you would in a kacheri. Right?
That's right. Because in a typical Carnatic music kacheri, all your creative elements like raga, lapana, niraval, swaram, all that is already satisfied. So we focus solely on the devotional element and interpreting that line in different ways, and that's about it.
The bhakti is there.
Correct.
But in an Abhang concert, we also savor Manodharma Sangeeta, because that is also such an important part for us. So I remember...
So we celebrate the Carnatic music element also.
Yes. So it is also one way of introducing Carnatic elements to an audience which is Maharashtrian, which has probably never heard a Carnatic kacheri before. And I remember, Ranjani, remember that we sang Pandariche Bhutmote in Shanukhanand, which were, I think, had thousands of Maharashtrians who had gathered on the day of Ashad Ekadashi. And we sang Pandariche Bhutmote for the first time. And without planning, we started singing swaras here. Yeah. It was like this. Tuka Pandhari Sigela, Tuka Pandhari Sigela, Tuka Pandhari Sigela, Tuka Pandhari पंढरीसी गेला सगमदा दा दा ग गमदनी दानी माद ग दमद सगमद तुका पंढरीसी गेला गमदनी Dani sa ga ni sa da, dani sa ga ni sa da, da da ni sa sa ga ni sa, da da ni sa sa ga sa ni sa ga ni sa da, dani sa ma ga sa ni sa ga sa ni sa ga ni ga sa ni dani da ma tu ka Pandharisi gela. So definitely this is not done in Abhangs. Nobody sings Kalpanaswaras in Abhangs. But but these were our ways of trying to infuse Abhang with some Carnatic elements for a predominantly Maharashtrian Hindustani audience who otherwise may not have heard a Carnatic kacheri.
So this happened in a totally experimental way. It just happened on the spot.
Yes.
And it was so well received by the audience. And therefore
we started singing Abhangs in a much more open-minded way. It was not that every time we went and sang an Abhang, we followed the same structure, because there are two of us. It's all the more difficult to take off, because we have to be anchored to the same version of it at some points at least.
Correct.
But again, to take off in the middle of the Abhang and to interpret it in a fresh way, these were all things that we learnt as we sang the Abhang in this setup. And I think the latest thing, because now what is the result of a lot of brainstorming or a lot of discussion, there is a certain rightness, or we feel, yes, this is a decision that was not lightly taken.
To give an example, I think it will be very nice to give an example.
Yeah, once we early days we were tuning the Abhang Ka Ranjle Ganjle, and we now sing it in Bairagi. But back then, I think I tuned it in Vrindavani. So it was like this. Ka Ranjle Ganjle, Tyaasi mane zo aapule. Ka Ranjle Ganjle, Tyaasi mane zo aapule. Tochi sadhu olakhawa. So this is how I set it. And Ranjani kept saying, no, it doesn't sound right. The meaning of the Abhang, she would say that it is Ka Ranjle Ganjle Tyaasi mani zo aapule. There's a pathos about the words, that
the downtrodden,
a person whose heart bleeds for the suffering. Such a man is such a great man. He is a man of God. So there is a pathos, there is a sentiment about the Abhang, which Vrindavani, with his happy-go-lucky, there's a certain joy and a carefree vibrancy to the raga which does not fit. And I said, we have never done an Abhang in Vrindavani. It's so beautiful. Why are you just going on finding fault? And we had a huge argument about this. And then I said, of course, post-argument, I always tend to think, I'll fight, tooth and nail for something.
Then I suggested that maybe we should, bring down the Rishabha, the
Ka Ranjle Ganjle, Tyaasi mane zo aapule. That's what you suggested. She said, see, when the re comes down, that adds such a poignancy to the Abhang, and that is what we want. It is just one note, but it gives such a difference. It made us discover some other tune, and which probably sat better.